Yeah, so the reproductive age really stretches from puberty right to premenopause. So we're talking, late teens to late 40s. During this stage, there's unique physiological challenges that often revolve around menstruation-related disorders, uterine or ovarian diseases, and infertility. So we'll start with sort of the journey to conceive a child, as that's, one place where many people can face challenges. As many as 1 in 4 people experience a miscarriage in Canada. And we know that fertility challenges have doubled since the 1980s, with 1 in 6 people experiencing infertility. There's a lot of stigma around miscarriages and infertility, and for this reason, many people will not share what they're going through, at work or with their colleagues. For many women, their identity is wrapped around their ability to bear children, and that's just something that's been sort of built into us from society. And so for this reason, the physical symptoms of miscarriages and infertility are often accompanied by, real heavy mental symptoms, particularly grief. So this can be the grief of losing a child if you go through a miscarriage or a stillbirth, or it can be grieving, that you might have to build your family in a way that you didn't imagine. So support for fertility drugs and procedures can help to alleviate some of those financial pressures associated with infertility and to reduce the mental load to some degree. But it's also important to remember that a growing family can look different for everyone. So for many people, such as those in the LGBTQ2+ community, families are often built through surrogacy and adoption. But these processes can be very stressful and very expensive. So in Canada, costing upwards of $100,000. Sun Life's new, inclusive family building program does support employees who are using fertility procedures, surrogacy, adoption, whichever method they're using to grow their family. So employers can consider what benefits are available to add to their plan there. And then moving on to sort of the next stage of the reproductive journey, a successful conception, means pregnancy. So pregnancy can be an exciting time, but it can also, come with a lot of anxiety and still a lot of expenses. Luckily, here in Canada, most of the serious medical conditions and complications do have support within the public healthcare system. And we have found, over the last several decades, employers are quite accommodating when it comes to maybe time off policies to support symptoms or medical visits that pregnant women might need. However, there are still, plenty of other ways that employers can support pregnant women. When you think about your extended healthcare plans, ensure there's sufficient coverage for paramedical practitioners, chiropractors, osteopaths, physiotherapists, pelvic floor specialists. They're all vital resources to relieve discomfort and prepare for childbirth. And you can also consider health and personal spending accounts. They will provide, coverage for a wider range of equipment that you might need for a baby, or alternative providers such as doulas that might be helpful during the birthing process. And then once we get into the postpartum stage, it can be a quite challenging phase, both physically and mentally. It's the greatest risk of depression that a woman will face in her lifetime. It's during postpartum. This is when we see the most significant drop in hormones. And then it's accompanied by physical pain, sleep deprivation, potentially some adjustment challenges, maybe identity crisis. There can be grief or birth trauma, some degree of social isolation. So all of this really creates a perfect storm for postpartum depression. In Canada, approximately 23% of women who have recently given birth experience postpartum depression or anxiety. And for them, symptoms can last upwards of 6 months. So we're not talking about the baby blues that you might experience in the first few days following birth. We see that only about 30% of women actually receive treatment for postpartum depression, and about 50% go undiagnosed. So while plan members or employees might not be actively at work during this time, there's still a role for employers to play, supporting them through group benefits. So again, look at those, maximums when it comes to paramedical and mental health practitioners. So, coverage for virtual visits or online programs can be particularly helpful for mental health practitioners during this time, for women who really need easy access to care and don't necessarily have a lot of time on their hands. Specialized physiotherapists that can help with the physical recovery, they can be very expensive. So check your maximums, consider maybe separating them out from other paramedical benefits. You can also look at adding incontinence supplies to EHC coverage, look at coverage for a breast pump in your eligible equipment list. Those are also very pricey. And then again, coming back to, a health or personal spending account, they can be helpful to cover any of those additional items that you might need for the baby, or even parenting courses when you want to look at maybe some adjustment and socialization opportunities.
Was the working world really designed for two parents to be working as much as we work? When I think about childcare responsibilities or responsibilities to caregivers, the workplace and the world, the schools are not even set up in an appropriate way in many cases for there to be the full support that's needed throughout the journey of parenting. So I think when you start from talking about conception and how that journey looks for someone and the challenges that somebody might have within the workplace and the emotions that are attached to that. Planning, even for career planning, what that looks like. Will it stop your career? How does that progress it? How does that look for a woman or a parent in general? And then it progresses into having that child potentially being off, whether you're having that child yourself, whether you're adopting a child, what does that look like? And then bouncing back from all those hormonal changes, your life is now completely different. And what does that look like for your working life on an everyday basis? So schools don't tend to match working hours. So now we have to think about childcare. We need to think about what other things come up. If your child is sick during the day, do you have enough time off built in? Or is that taking up all of your vacation days? How flexible can you be? It's a very big challenge, and it's a challenge for all the parents involved. It's not only, a mother's responsibility, but it really gets challenging to, use your time and then find time for yourself as a person entering back into the workforce, and then expecting again for your career to continue to advance.
I think about my own experiences and experiences of our employees. The people leader plays a really important role in the experience of any employee going through all the experiences that Krista described. I was thinking, like, the first person I told when I was pregnant with all of my 3 kids was my manager, who is male. I only had male managers my entire career. The first person at work I told, not the first person I told, the first person at work I told that I was pregnant was my manager. The first person at work I told when I miscarried was my manager. The first person I told at work when I was having postpartum was my manager. And so that's a lot, so the reaction of our people leaders and the support from our people leaders and how to have those conversations on building an environment where you can have those open and honest conversations and you feel that you can be vulnerable at work with your people leader. That plays a really big role in the type of experience you have as an employee in the workplace, and wrapping it around with all the benefits that Krista talked about and all the things that Tiana spoke about as well. But I just think about, like, when I look back at those experiences, it's that people leader experience, those conversations that had the biggest impact and support that I received in the workplace.
There's just so many myths and misconceptions out there about how the law applies to all of these issues that we're talking about. And I mean, Todd, I'm sure you've heard me say this before in other contexts. I mean, one of the reasons that our firm is so busy is because of all the assumptions that people make. And this area is certainly no exception to that. So, if the question, gets back to the original question, what should employers understand? From my perspective, employers need to understand how the law works and what their rights and their obligations are, and then of course comply with them. And one of the topics that's come up a few times is pregnancy and parental leave, which, as Tiana said, applies to men and women, with the parental side of that. But there are so many, first of all, misunderstandings about what the law says, but also even when employers know what the law says, is the explicit or implicit discouragement of people, discouraging women from taking their full entitlement to leave, discouraging men from taking the full entitlement to leave. There are still workplaces, and I hear these stories regularly, including within the last week, where the comment is quote unquote jokingly made that, oh, if you're going to work here, don't get pregnant. Or when someone goes off on pregnancy leave and they make arrangements to come back, well, we hope you're not going to get pregnant again. Or there is the expectation that even when someone is off on a pregnancy or parental leave, they're still checking in and still doing a little bit of work here or there. And of course, I still see the situation where somebody goes off on a pregnancy parental leave, and then when it's time for them to return, the employer says, actually, we kind of like your replacement better, so we're not going to bring you back. which is a breach of the Employment Standards Act, but a lot of people don't know that. So I think it's critical that people understand how the law works, and then also how to enforce their rights. Getting back to my point from earlier about not being scared or shy to do that. And a lot of this, and I don't mean to put HR in the spotlight, but a lot of this does fall on HR to make sure that people are aware of how the law works and what their rights are on both sides of the fence. HR, I have a lot of sympathy for those in HR who are really stuck in the middle of a lot of these conversations, but it's important that they make sure everyone knows, how what the law says and how things should work. So that to me is, and I still think there's a lot of work to be done there, although Jenny, we're very positive. There have been a lot of improvements. Things have gotten a lot better. I look back to my experience when my kids were born, which is sort of 18, 20, 21 years ago now. I sort of took 2 weeks of my vacation time so I could at least be home for the first few weeks after the childbirth, but there was no parental leave. And I was working at a big firm, and it was certainly not easy to take time to go to appointments and things like that. It's a lot better now. But the problem is that the law still needs to evolve, but a lot of people don't even know how far it has evolved since then. So there's still a lot of work to be done.